and thank you for joining us today. My name is Connor Lynch, Government Media Specialist for Westwood Media Center. Today, we'd like to take a moment to talk about fraud, scammers, and identity theft, ways that you can prevent them from happening to yourself, and steps that you can avoid to stay out of those situations in the first place. And very few people in Massachusetts are as well equipped to talk about this issue than my guest today, Mr. Greg White. Greg, thank you for joining us
Thanks
today.
for having me, Connor.
Yeah, it's a wonderful treat to have more and more people on the show. And
Well, thank you. As I said, I'm familiar with your town. I was a prosecutor out here years ago, so nice to be back. But I'm in a different capacity. I'm the Chief of Staff and General Counsel to the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation. And as we were talking about before the show, a lot of times when people hear that, they automatically think, oh, it's the Attorney General's office. That's a big part of what Maura Healey's office does, Consumer Protection Division. But they're the enforcer, we're the regulator. And we have a fairly broad mandate in terms of what falls under our umbrella, in addition to our own a specific mandate within our office. But as we talked about before the show, we oversee 5 divisions. And the Undersecretary Chapman likes to say that we regulate Main Street America. Pretty much every business that you go down, whether or not it's a gas station, an insurance company, a bank, a barber shop, we regulate. And as such, we oversee the Division of Banks, which is responsible for regulating state-chartered banks and credit unions. There are over 184, with combined assets of over $400 billion. They also oversee 9,500 what they call non-depository entities, so debt collectors, check cashing business, amongst other things. We oversee the Division of Insurance, which regulates healthcare insurance, property insurance, as well as auto insurance. They have about 100,000 what they call producers that they license. In addition to, they oversee the Surcharge Appeal Board, and most people are familiar with it in Massachusetts. You get in an accident, you're surcharged, you can appeal to the board. We're the only state within the United States that have this. Every other state, if you have a surcharge, you appeal it to your insurance company, which is a bit of a conflict there, if you will.
I'm dealing with it right now myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we had last year we had 30,000 appeals. 2/3 of them were vacated. So it serves you well if, in fact, you're involved in an accident and you're found over 50% at fault to appeal that. And we're a very unique board, the only one in the United States. In addition to that, we have the Division of Standards, which, as we talked about before the show, they oversee weights and measures. So they license gas stations, they license auto body repair shops, as well as glass repair shops. They inspect fuel delivery trucks. And the biggest issue that they're involved in is skimming devices, where they're popping up in fuel gas stations throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We oversee the Department of Telecommunications and Cables, which regulates that industry. And our biggest agency is the Division of Professional Licensure, which we just consolidated the Division of Professional Licensure with Department of Public Safety. So we regulate everything from nuclear power plants, amusement parks, the Boxing Commission. We license electricians, veterinarians, chiropractors, accountants, plumbers. There's over 500,000 licensees that we license in Massachusetts. So they're one of our biggest entities. So that's the world that we oversee. But in addition to that, we have our own mandate. We oversee the do not call along with the federal government. So if you're being harassed by telemarketers, you can be placed on the do not call list that we maintain. We oversee the data breach, which is one of our bigger focuses these days, given all the identity theft. So if you hold personal information of a Massachusetts resident and that information is compromised, you're required to notify our office along with the Attorney General's office how many Massachusetts residents' information was breached, the nature of the breach, and what you're doing to address that. So that information comes to our office and the Attorney General's office as well. We oversee the lemon law arbitration program. So if you've been aggrieved by purchasing a new or pre-owned vehicle, you can apply for arbitration through our office. And one of our biggest programs, as we talked about before the show, is a home improvement contracting program. You know, that is an important part of the Office of Consumer Affairs. When you think of it, Connor, one of the biggest assets that people have is their home. And you can't even do the smallest project without spending thousands of dollars. So it's important that consumers know that before you enter into an agreement, it should be a written contract with an individual who is properly registered through our office. And we maintain a website as well as a hotline that you can call in. If that individual has been disciplined by our office, we have a complaint process and you can be made aware of that. If in fact you've been aggrieved by a contract, you can file a complaint with our office, and our attorneys can either dismiss it, finding that there's no basis to it, or they can fine the contractor, suspend their registration, or revoke their registration. We're working very closely with town building inspectors. We're asking them, and they're doing a fantastic job of helping us do enforcement prior to issuing a building permit to make sure that they're registered. And we tell consumers that if you hire a general contract, you shouldn't be pulling the permit. That's their responsibility. And we have building inspectors to ensure that, in fact, before they issue it, that individual is properly registered. We also oversee the CSL program, which is the Construction Supervisor License through DPL. And as we talked about before the show, that's the license that requires some training and education, whereas registration is anyone can get that. But the important part is that we oversee a complaint process and, more importantly, a guarantee fund, which means that if in fact you've been aggrieved by a contract, provided you meet the criteria, you can apply and receive up to $10,000 from the Office of Consumer Affairs to recoup for your losses. So that's one of our most important programs. And lastly, we have a hotline, which is maintained by our Northeastern students. We have 4 co-op students from Northeastern who do a terrific job. They spend 6 months with us throughout the year. So this group just started this summer. They'll finish up in December. We have a whole new group coming in January, and they'll stay with us through June. They receive hundreds of calls a day from consumers who have questions, whether or not it's on the HIC program, landlord-tenant, foreclosures, what have you. We tell consumers that they're not lawyers, they're not there to provide legal advice, but at the end of the day, they can answer basic questions or, more importantly, point you in the right direction. So if you have an issue with your healthcare premiums, they'll refer you to the Division of Insurance. All these agencies have consumer hotlines and specialists that can answer consumers' questions. And as a result of getting hundreds of calls a day, they field quite a few calls involving identity theft and scams that are out there. We maintain a blog. So we're made aware of a scam, we put it up on the blog to notify consumers. The biggest issue, as we talked about before the show, is identity theft. Mm-hmm. You know, having been a prosecutor, back in the day when I was a young prosecutor, identity theft consisted of someone losing their wallet and then getting your license, and at the time a lot of people's license numbers was your social security number, so your information was compromised. Now people don't even have to leave their home. They can hack into your computer.
Now people won't even notice if the wallet goes missing because it's not even dependent on the wallet anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, with skimming devices and ransomware and all the different ways that they can access your information. You look at Target, you look at Uber, you look at the federal government. You know, I worked for one of the presidential administrations, and their system was hacked a couple years ago, and millions of current and former federal employees had their information compromised. So it's not a question of whether or not your information is going to be compromised at some point, Connor, or mine. That's a gimme. The only question is when it's going to occur and how often it's going to occur and what steps you're going to take to protect your information.
Absolutely.
And towards that end, we advise consumers that there are basic ways. One of the most important ways is protect your password. and create a password that can't easily be associated with you. About a year ago, I got an email from my brother who lives in the Netherlands. He said, you need to change your password, your system's been hacked. So I went online, I put number of digits and names that couldn't be associated with me. And recently my son and I were running a half marathon, and before the gun went off, I was trying to get onto iTunes, and he said, what's your password? Well, by the time he entered into it, the gun had gone off in thousands of runners. But the fact is, no one's going to access this password. So we advise consumers to protect your password and change it often. That's one of the basic ways. The other thing is you can utilize devices that, in addition to protect your personal information, one of which is, are you familiar with the process or the concept called dumpster divers?
Dumpster divers, I mean, I know people who kind of just like dig through the trash and try to find like old gems in there in order to like take it home and kind of like renovate it and refurbish it and stuff like that.
Right, but there are those who do that, and there are those who are going in there looking for personal information.
No kidding.
So people will throw out bank statements, old tax returns with their social security number, any document containing personal information. They'll go through your trash and they'll have your personal information. So we advise consumers to invest in a paper shredder. Cheap money, you can get it at one of the local outfits out there, and it protects your information. You're shredding these documents rather than just tossing it in the trash. The other area that we're involved with identity theft is skimming devices. We talked about that before the show. The Division of Standards, which is responsible for inspecting fuel pumps throughout Massachusetts. If you're a community and you have 5,000 residents or less, they're required to inspect your fuel pumps. If it's over 5,000, they can contract with the Division of Standards. And right now we have 67, 68 communities that use our inspectors. But they'll go out and they'll inspect fuel pumps. And what they're finding is these skimming devices.
Now, what exactly is a skimming device?
A skimming device, and I know you can put that on the screen at some point, but a skimming device, it takes different forms. One of the photographs that we have there is what they'll do, Connor, is they'll pry open the machine and they'll place this device in there. It's a wire. Now, back in the day when our inspectors or when a proprietor found these devices, they would call the police and have them retrieve it. These people who were putting in these skimming devices many times would come back and try to retrieve the device, and then they would be apprehended. Now they're using Bluetooth, so they don't even have to access. It's cost of doing business.
They just have to go in once, put it in, and then you're
done. They're done.
Yeah.
Now they're using, in every, so often we're being updated by the Division of Standards in terms of what they're using. They're using cell phone parts, and now they connect with an individual cell phone, and it texts the information. So what they'll do is they'll put the skimming device in, you put your credit card in, you punch in your password. There's a connection to the keypad.
It's a keylogger, basically.
Exactly, and it will transmit the password back along with the credit card information. We've done cybersecurity conferences over the last few years, and we've partnered with the FBI and Secret Service. One of the agents was telling us that they had an investigation in which involved a mom and pop store from upstate New York. High tourism area, a lot of tourists came in, and they had put these devices on their machines up there. It was a group out of Eastern Europe. They had retrieved this information, and they had distributed it to 30 countries worldwide with a caveat: don't release it until you're given the green light in terms of date and time, at which point they gave them the green light, and within hours, millions of dollars had been compromised. And that was just one small entity in upstate New York. So,
and all it takes is two people in order to do that much damage to millions of people.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're putting them in these fuel pumps. They're putting them in ATM machines. Our division of banks has gotten calls from financial institutions in which they have found these skimming devices. And what they'll do, Connor, is they'll put a facade over the existing facade, which will have the skimming devices.
And that's this blue device here, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
and many times what they'll do is they'll put a camera, they'll mount a camera. So the camera's capturing your password, and the skimming device is capturing your personal information. Not too long ago, there was a correction officer who was attending a concert in Providence. He went to get some money out of an ATM machine, and he noticed the facade was slightly ajar, so he pulled it. And it was a skimming device. Now, we don't recommend you do that because it's important forensic information.
Otherwise, it might look like you might have been the person
Well,
who was,
that, and you can compromise potential evidence, if you will. So notify the proprietor if it's a gas station, or the bank if it's a financial institution. They have handheld skimming devices in which they'll use at airports, bus terminals, and train stations. They'll walk up against you and brush up against your wallet.
That's all it takes, really.
And retrieve your information. So we haven't come up with it, someone came up with them, we're utilizing them. Those are protective sleeves. You put your credit card in there, and it protects you from having your information accessed. And those are for you, Connor. So
thank you.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly.
We also don't ride the bus.
Yeah, exactly. We've also come up with protective sleeves for passports, because there's a chip put in there, and they can access that information at an airport by just rubbing up against you if the sleeve of the passport is open, and retrieve your information. So we ask consumers to be vigilant. Be aware of of your surroundings. When you go to pump your gas, there's a sticker that's put on that you've probably seen.
Yes.
And it's put there by our state inspector, or it's put there by a local inspector. If that's been breached, you should notify the proprietor. Those have been put on. Now, the problem is, whenever we find a way to address it, we've recently learned that these individuals who are utilizing these skimming devices have come up with a counterfeit sticker. So, I mean, it's, one step forward, two steps back. But our inspectors are constantly out there. They're working closely with law enforcement to identify and confiscate these devices, and then bring or prosecute those individuals who are connected to these devices. So skimming devices are a big part of how your information can be compromised. There are steps that you can take if your information has been compromised. Recently my wife and I were having a home improvement project done on our home. Met with the contractor, and the woman who was doing the design work learned that I was with the Office of Consumer Affairs, and she said, recently, she said, I went to refinance my condo, and I found that someone had gotten my personal information, had purchased a condominium in her name, had purchased or was leasing a vehicle in her name, and she wasn't aware of it, and nor would she be made aware of it until she went to refinance. So we advise consumers to run your credit report. At least by law, they have to provide you with one on an annual basis. Look through it to see if that information on that is in fact yours, and take the appropriate step if it's not. In addition to that, if your information has been compromised, you can put a freeze on your credit card. You can put a freeze on your credit report, so someone can't access that without going through the proper channels. Because I was a former federal employee, my information had been compromised when the federal government system was hacked a few years ago. That same week, I was notified by my mortgage company that my personal information had been compromised. So within 5 days, my personal information had been compromised by 2 entities. I put a freeze on our credit report. Recently, my wife and I were at an electronics store getting some equipment for our house, and they said, listen, you can get a credit card, get 10% off, just pay it all off and get the 10%. I said, all right, why not? So I gave them my Social Security number, and they said, it's been declined. And so they put me on the phone with corporate, and they said, did you recently put a freeze on your? And I said, oh yes. Now it's supposed to be for 90 days. This was
Yeah.
over a year ago.
Yeah.
And they said, well, you should notify them to remove it. And I said, no, I want to keep it that way.
Yeah.
We use my wife's social security number.
That's a good indicator
Right.
as well, yeah.
Exactly, which is perfect, right? So there are steps you can take to protect your information. Review your bank statements. What they'll do is when they do obtain your personal information, they'll make a small purchase, for a couple of dollars, just to see if it's an active card. Usually they'll put a couple dollars in your account and then retrieve that just to make sure it's active.
And I'm sure it's also to see if like the person that they're trying to scam will notice that
Exactly,
as well. Yeah.
exactly. And then the next thing you're going to see $1,000 withdrawn from your account. So review your bank statements on a monthly basis, either online or the paper document as well.
Yeah.
So identity theft is a big part of our focus these days, as it is with everyone. In addition to that, we also, because of our consumer hotline, hear about a variety of scams. I'm sure you've heard of the IRS scam. It's been around for years.
Yeah.
People are still being victimized by it. The twist I heard, normally they'll call you and they'll say, we're calling for the IRS and you need to wire some money or you'll be subject to criminal prosecution. The IRS doesn't operate like that.
Yeah.
But people
will fall for it.
Will
Absolutely.
fall for it. Now the twist is they'll reach out to the immigrant community, and instead of saying you'll be criminally prosecuted, they'll say you're going to be deported. So they take it a step further. So it's the IRS scam, the fake lottery scam, which has been around forever. They say you've won $1 million or you've won 100,000. You just need to pay the taxes beforehand. And you would think that in this day and age, everyone's heard of it. No one's going to be fall for it.
But we'd be surprised.
You'd be surprised. We had there was an article in the Boston Globe last year, and it talked about this type of scam, and they identified individuals, one of which had basically been victimized by 3 outfits, and then a 4th one contacted them and said, I understand you've won 3 lotteries. In order to, by law, to collect more than one, you need to have this association to be associated with, if you will, and you pay a small fee and whatnot. So this guy basically was out $100,000 and didn't receive 1 penny.
Yeah.
So we asked, again, consumers to be aware that there's scammers out there. The latest scam I heard not too long ago is the hotel scam.
Never heard of
What
it.
they do is you check into a hotel, you give your credit card. Someone is loitering around the
lobby. Yeah.
the lobby. They call your room. They say, "Oh, this is the front desk. We just need you to read your credit card back because we misplaced it, and with the expiration and your 3-digit social security."
Yeah.
And people think, "Okay, it's front desk. What's the big deal?" And this person's not even there.
Yeah.
The Microsoft. It goes on and on and on, and it's unfortunate. But people, what we tell consumers, if it sounds too good to be true,
It's too good to
it
be
probably
true.
is.
Yeah.
So those are the scams that we tell people to be aware of. Those are the programs that we oversee, and we tell consumers that if you do have an issue, you can contact our office. I'll provide you with the toll-free number as well as the local number in Boston. And if you have a question, be it with banks, insurance, with standards, telecommunications and cable, with your cable bill, you can contact our office. If we don't have the answer, we can direct you to the appropriate agency.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's our world.
All right.
That's our world. Yeah.
Seems like you guys do like pretty much everything, I want to say.
Well,
Yeah.
again, the Undersecretary says we regulate Main Street America, and if you go down, there's pretty much every entity on there.
Yeah.
We regulate, and we're the regulators. We don't do the enforcement. So if we have an issue with a licensing or a compliance issue, then we work very closely with the Attorney General's office. They're the ones who will go in and enforce it in court if need be. So we partner well with them, and we have a good relationship.
Excellent. So moving gears just a little bit, we were talking before the show, and I was talking with you in emails and whatnot about the home improvement contract program.
Sure.
And I'm wondering if you can kind of give just an overview of what that is for somebody who maybe never heard of that before.
Okay, so if you're doing a project, the first thing you should do is ask them for their HIC registration. And we issue cards. You can then, as a consumer, call our office or look them up the website to see if it's active or if they've ever been disciplined. Now we're not going to get into the specifics in terms of the facts of that disciplinary hearing, but we can tell you if they've ever been disciplined or if they complain, how many times, if you will. And I also like to say, Connor, that most contractors out there are doing the right thing. You know, they take pride in their work. They want to do a good job. Word of mouth and references goes a long way. You know, I had a contractor who said, you know, with all the social media, someone, you know, is disgruntled. Even if you think you did a good job and you tried to please, they put a bad review, and it can impact their livelihood. So they want you to walk away satisfied. So most of them out there are doing the right thing, but we tell consumers to verify that they have an HIC registration. It should be a written contract. It should contain specific information, and we keep a sample contract that we can provide consumers. And
now, can a contractor be a contractor without this registration, or is this a requirement?
It's for the majority of work that's done out there. There are exceptions.
Yeah.
Above ground pools, interior painting don't require registration. But most of the work that you're doing, whether it's remodeling a kitchen or a family room, requires an HIC registration, and it may involve a CSL. So we can contact our office or DPL, and we can provide you with that.
So what is a CSL?
It's a construction supervisor license, which requires someone to take a course, be proficient in the information in the area that they're going to be licensed in. And most of the work that requires an HIC requires a CSL as well. Okay. So we maintain a list of that as well. Once you enter into a contract, we recommend that you don't pay everything up front. And by law, a contractor can't require you to pay 100% up front. Okay. We recommend a third, and a third. You know, that way there's an incentive, and if you're not happy as the work goes along, you have some leverage. Yeah. So that's what we recommend. If at the end of the process you're dissatisfied, you can contact our office. Again, most of the people out there doing a great job. But there are some, we've had a few in Natick. We had a contractor who went to a woman's house. She was renovating the second floor for her elderly parents. As part of the contract, they took the roof off. He took a $60,000 deposit and then disappeared. And this was in November. And so she had, this past year, a winter without a roof. And we're working very closely with local prosecutors, local police departments to go after these individuals. Because at the end of the day, even though they're few and far between, it can have catastrophic effects financially on a family who gives a huge deposit and then ends up not having the work done. And
even outside of just having like the financial situation happen, you also have this under construction home or something like that.
Exactly.
That something's critically wrong with the home.
Exactly.
That creates even more problems.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if at the end of the day you've been agreed by the contract, provided you meet the criteria, you can apply for compensation under our guarantee fund. And because of the increased compliance, we've been able to maintain the guarantee fund. When we took it over a few years ago, there wasn't enough funds in there. And the way it's funded, for the most part, is when a contractor registers, he pays a one-time fee into the guarantee fund. Okay. It could be anywhere from $100 to $500. And those funds go to pay out on these claims. If you meet the criteria, you can recoup up to $10,000, which is a great resource for consumers as well that most people aren't aware of. And Absolutely. We've had quite a few because we're getting the word out to consumers. But it has to be with an individual who's registered. You have to have a written contract. So if you don't do your due diligence, and many times people get a reference by word of mouth. Their neighbor had their kitchen done. They like it and they say, who did you have to, ABC Construction. They reach out to them. You still should do your due diligence.
Yeah.
Seek references.
Even if you have that word of mouth and that peace of mind
Exactly.
that someone else did do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's important because if you trust your neighbor, you're more likely to go along with them than if it's through a third party. But do your due diligence, make sure they're properly registered, make sure you have a written contract. That allows you to access the guarantee fund should you be agreed by the contract.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself in that kind of situation, how would you kind of start that arbitration process in terms of contacting
You would
guys?
contact our office. They'll tell you what paperwork needs to be done, what criteria needs to be met, and once the process has been, once all the paperwork is in and everything's been done accordingly, we're paying out within 30 days. It used to be a year and a half because they didn't have the funds to pay out on these claims. But it's been a great resource for consumers who've been aggrieved by a contract.
Absolutely.
Yep. So.
Well, Greg, I want to thank you again for coming on the show today. You were a wonderful guest.
Well, thanks for having me, Connor. And,
kind of learned a lot more than I was expecting, and I'm happy to do that, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'll give you the toll-free number, and you can get it out to your viewers. And if they have any questions, either about the HIC or the data breach or the do not call or lemon law or any of our agencies we oversee, please feel free to have them reach out to us, and we're happy to assist them any way we can.
Excellent.
Okay. Well, thanks.
Thank you again. My name is Connor Lynch, and thank you for joining us today.